Today we're going to talk about two of the most popular dual sports on the planet today. You can see them behind me, the KLX300 and the CRF300L. This is basically kind of my thoughts and likes and dislikes, I guess, of both of them after. That's a 2023 300L behind me. I have owned that since early summer of 23. It has a little over 1,000 miles on it. And the KLX is a 2024 with only 250 miles. But if you follow the channel, I traded in, I purchased a 2021 KLX 300 brand new. And I traded that in on this 2024 earlier this year. So that being said, I basically have roughly 4 years of experience on the KLX. When I traded mine in, I believe it had about 2,600 miles on it. So I got that amount of time on there, and like I said, a full year and a half on the Honda over here. So that being said, we'll take a look at them. Now I'm not going to go over my full mod list on both of these bikes. I have videos on each bike of that, but these bikes are basically set up with the same standard accessories on them. The one main difference is the suspension on the KLX is stock. The suspension on the CRF is upgraded with the Racetech spring in the front fork and a Racetech spring for my weight on the rear. Not a full shock replacement, just a spring replacement on the rear. And as far as the drivetrain, the Honda is still stock, and the KLX is 13 tooth on the front, and I believe I'm 1 tooth larger on the rear sprocket. So that being said, let's take a look at them, and I'll kind of go over the things that I prefer on one over the other and something like that. Let's check them out. Okay. Now, CRF 300L, just over 1,000 miles, 0 issues, has not had to go back to the dealership for anything. I have had no problems that I have taken care of myself. Everything's been good, no issues. So, what do I like about the CRF 300? First off is I've had, I don't know, in the last 25 years I've had a ton of different dual sports. And every one, whether they were small bikes or larger bore, I always have to change the gearing so it works for slow technical trails, but then still try to make it so you can cruise comfortably at a higher speed. This CRF 300L is spot on. I did not touch the gearing. You can do slow single track, very slow tight single track, but you can also get on the highway and cruise comfortably at 70 miles an hour if that's what you prefer, and even if you're on the right stretch of road, even higher pace. So that I love about the CRF 300L. The ergonomics on the CRF 300, I'm not as big of a fan of the ergonomics. It is, you have a little less distance between your crotch and your foot peg. And my inseam, I'm going to say is, I'm trying to think here, I believe 32, and I feel a little cramped and squished on this. Like my knees feel like they're way up in the air when I'm sitting on the CRF. So that's one thing I kind of dislike about that as far as the ergonomics. Ride quality, as far as going down the highway, good, smooth, no noticeable vibration at all in these small bores. Very good. Braking, You know, I'm not comparing this to the KTM that I have or the 350 or anything like that, but the braking is good. It's not anywhere that it's something to worry about. If you're coming up and you have an emergency and you got to stop, you'll stop. It'll get the job done. Of course, another thing that everybody hates is the suspension. So that's why I upgraded it. Now, if you're someone who is buying this bike just to bebop around town or even trail ride at a slow pace, leisurely rides in the woods, this suspension will be fine for you. Now, if you're somebody that's going to load down, a bunch of luggage on it and start doing light adventure, you're gonna definitely probably want to upgrade the rear suspension somewhat and the front. But you can buy this bike and ride it for a long time stock if you're not somebody that's riding very hard on a bike or doing long adventure trips. Let's take some more looks at it here. As far as looks, I like these bikes. I always like to have a bike that looks good. This one looks good. I mean, this front fender is a CRF300L fender. I think it looks a little better than the stock one. So I did change that. One thing on the CR300L, you can see I have a zip tie on the brake line here because it sticks up in a big large loop and it tends to block your screen here whenever you're sitting on the bike and riding it. You have a little bit of trouble seeing directly down to the screen. So there are kits that you can take care of this and modify this hose so it's not in your way. I just put a zip tie there with a loop on it and it keeps it out of the way. And there's still enough play for the suspension when it goes up and down. As far as all your switches and everything, they're a little bit larger than most dual sports. They're easy to find because they're a little bit of a larger profile. So I like that on there. And of course, these bikes come with the small fuel tanks around 2.0 gallons. This one does have the upgraded tank. I do like that. And one thing that is awesome with the CRF is, I don't know if you can see my gauge here well, but of course you have the fuel gauge and a gear selector. That is awesome. I love having the freaking fuel gauge. Gear selector is nice too. Sometimes you're going down the road and you're not sure what gear you're in. You kind of forget. So it's nice to have that. That's definitely one plus, big plus on the Honda. I love the gearing and I love the fuel gauge, gear selector. I hate the suspension. So, that being said, let's move on over to this guy, the KLX 300. Now, of course, right off the bat, I'm going to say suspension is light years better than the CRF. Is it incredible? Is it like a KTM 350, WP? No. But I am about, depending on how many donuts I eat in the week, with gear, I'm like 210 to 220 with gear. And I ride these bikes on the same trails as the KTM 350. I mean, I ride them hard. I run them down the street. This suspension has been fine for me. I have it like 2 clicks up stiffer on the front and the same with the rear from stock. But stock was very good. I just added a little bit for when I was riding it harder the last time. That's one big plus for this bike. Now, one thing that is a negative compared to the CRF is if you want to try to get the bottom end like the CRF, you definitely have to put a 13-tooth sprocket on the front. And like I did, possibly go up 1 or 2 teeth on the rear sprocket. But saying that, you still are not going to get the bottom end of the CRF. The CRF300L has awesome bottom end. And the KLX, I don't even think if you remove the secondary throttle plate, I don't think you're going to get to the bottom end of the CRF. One other thing I don't like, of course, is you have no fuel gauge here, of course, on your dash. The CRF dash is just a little bit of a better looking dash, and there's no fuel gauge or gear indicator on that. You just have odometer, clock, and you do have the RPM range there. And of course you have your check engine light, your idiot lights down there, and you can set your clock. Now I will say on this bike, when I had the stock tank on this, I never ran it empty. This bike here, I filled it up and I ran it till the fuel light come on, and it came on at 121 miles is where the fuel light come on. Now, I'm not sure how far you had to go once that light comes on. I know on other bikes I've had, it was usually about 10 miles. I'm going to say 5 to 10 miles. So, but you can do 121 that's with a pipe and with the KDX snorkel on the airbox. No fuel controller. Neither bike has a fuel controller. I'm running them stock, CDI box, no fuel controller. And this bike, for me, the ergonomics are better. I just feel better in the seat to bar relationship, and of course this is definitely a little wider of an area, crotch to foot peg. So I feel much better as far as that. And looking at the bikes, I'm not sure what the ratings are as far as ground clearance, but I can definitely see standing right here that the KLX has more ground clearance. I mean, it looks to me almost like it has another 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches ground clearance. I should have measured that. Like I said, to me, braking is very similar on both of the bikes. Vibration on these bikes, they're very similar going down the highway. The CRF may have the slightest edge as far as a little bit smoother when you're cruising at like 65 miles an hour. Just a very slight edge, very slight. And of course the KLX with the Restyle is a great looking bike. I mean, I love the look of it. And I have had no issues with this bike, or my previous KLX 300 had 2,600 miles on it, and it never had to go to the dealer. It had no issues. It ran flawlessly. And this is at only 250 miles, and of course it's doing well also. Headlights, I'm going to say I believe the headlight on the KLX is a little better as far as night riding. I don't do much night riding, but the headlight in the KLX is definitely a little better to me than the CRF as far as that goes. And like I said, you can see these bikes are fairly similar setup. I mean, as far as the exhaust, the racks, heated grips, bar risers. I set them both up the same so I could kind of tell which one I like better. And I mean, one of them's got to go because I have a DRZ 4S. My name is already on the list. It's already on order. So one of these is going to be going, and it's probably going to be the CRF300 is probably going to be the one that gets sold. Just basically because I don't want to put any more money into this suspension, and you definitely would have to get this up to the KLX, you have to do a full replacement on that rear shock to get it close to that. And that's just not something I want to do to keep this bike. I'd rather just keep the KLX, have a little bit, deal with a little bit of the less torque on the bottom end. And plus, if I'm getting the DRZ 4S, that'll take care of the torque problem anyhow. So, there you go. If you have any comments or questions, put them down below. And like I said, I have videos of all of the mods that are done to both of these, accessories, mods. You can check those out. They'll answer a lot of your questions as far as anything that I have done to these bikes. And I also have separate reviews on both of them, but I just wanted to do a little bit of a long-term on them. Like I said, they're both great bikes. They'll do anything that you want to do short of Graham Jarvis hard enduro. But they're going to make it anywhere through the woods. They're going to go up hill climbs. They're going to go down the highway. You'll have a blast on them, and they will do anything what you want to do. The best thing is, if you're just trying to decide between these two bikes, you almost have to ride them. Either go to a dealership that has both, or if you can find some people, you know, like me or other guys that ride and own them, ask them if you can take them for a ride and see what you like about each bike, because people are going to like one bike better and the other bike better. Just like me, like I'm sticking with the KLX, but I do love the bottom end on the CRF300L. That being said, like, subscribe, comment, get on your bike, get outside.